Sophia Davies had always been a fan of technology. A software engineer with a sharp mind and a fascination for innovation, she had spent her life on the cutting edge of what technology could offer. But when she received an invitation to test a new, exclusive piece of tech, a mysterious mirror called the Reflex, she never imagined it would lead her into a world she couldn't control. The Reflex was touted as the next big thing in virtual reality, a mirror that could show you not just your reflection, but your deepest desires, fears, and choices. The developers promised it would change the way people experience themselves. No more shallow reflections but deep, introspective revelations. It was supposed to be a tool for self-improvement. But, as Sophia soon discovered, the Reflex was far more than what it seemed. The first glimpse of Sophia's apartment was minimalistic, clean, and modern, just as she liked it. When the sleek black mirror arrived, it stood out like a forbidden object in her otherwise organized world. The reflection staring back at her felt different from the usual glass. This one seemed to shimmer, as if it were alive. At first, she was curious. She placed it in the living room, right across from the couch, eager to see what it could do. The developers had warned her to follow the instructions precisely, but her impatience took over. She tapped the mirror's surface, and immediately, the reflection shifted. It was her, but not quite. She was standing in a different version of her living room, one that looked older, more worn down. The clothes she wore were different, frayed jeans and a worn-out hoodie. She could feel a subtle discomfort, like she was seeing a version of herself that didn't quite belong to her reality. "Hello, Sophia," a voice spoke from the mirror. It was her voice, but distant, as if coming from another world. The reflection smiled back at her, but it wasn't the confident smile she was accustomed to. This was a smile tinged with sadness, with regret. She took a step back, unsure of what to make of this. "What is this?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling, even though she couldn't understand why she was afraid. This was just a mirror, after all. The Reflex shows you not only your reflection but the reality of your choices. It shows what could be, what might have been. The voice responded, "Look deeper." Sophia hesitated. She wasn't sure whether she was looking at some new form of augmented reality or a complex glitch, but her curiosity overpowered her fear. She leaned in closer. The dark side of choices. As Sophia continued to experiment with the mirror, she discovered that the Reflex wasn't limited to mere reflections. It showed her alternate versions of herself, versions of her life that could have unfolded based on different decisions she had made. Each version of her was an uncanny echo, a mirror of the life she had the potential to live, but never did. She saw herself as a successful tech mogul, surrounded by a glamorous office in a towering skyscraper. In another reflection, she was a stay-at-home mom, juggling family life in a modest home, a warm smile on her face, though her eyes were haunted by exhaustion. And in another, she saw herself alone, isolated in a dark room, working tirelessly, consumed by her ambition, but at the cost of her mental well-being. At first, Sophia found it fascinating. She marveled at how one decision could alter the course of her life. But then, the reflection began to change in a way she didn't expect. She saw herself as a broken version of herself, emotionally hollow, haunted by something beyond her control. Each alternate reality was a glimpse into what could have happened if she hadn't made certain decisions, but these reflections began to show darker, more sinister paths. One reflection showed her, older, with deep bags under her eyes, a strained expression frozen on her face. The room around her was bleak, filled with empty coffee cups and broken electronics. She saw herself on the verge of tears, desperate for answers but lost in her own failure. The voice spoke again. "Is this the life you wanted, Sophia? The one you're living now?" it asked, as if it could read her mind. Sophia stepped back, trying to shake the image from her head. But the voice continued. "You've chosen ambition over balance, success over happiness, achievement over contentment. But is it worth it? The slip into despair. Sophia became obsessed with the reflex. Each night, she would stand in front of it, tapping on its surface, hoping to see something new. But each time, the images became darker, more twisted. The reflection showed her alternate versions of herself, versions where she had chosen differently, where she was happy, content. But she was never satisfied. Every glimpse of the perfect life felt more like a condemnation of her current choices. She found herself trapped, unable to escape the endless cycle of comparisons. One night, she stood in front of the mirror, watching her reflection as it morphed into an older, sicker version of herself. The woman in the reflection looked back with hollow eyes, lost in the darkness. "This is who you will become," the voice said, its tone colder now. "You cannot escape your own mind. You cannot run from the consequences of your choices." Sophia's heart pounded as the reflection began to shift again. The room behind her seemed to grow darker, the walls stretching inward. The voice grew louder, more insistent. "You are a failure, Sophia. You're nothing but a product of your regrets." She couldn't bear it any longer. She slapped the mirror, hoping to break the connection, but the surface didn't crack. Instead, it rippled like water, pulling her in. Before she could react, the mirror's surface engulfed her, pulling her into the alternate reality she had spent so much time exploring. Trapped in the mirror, Sophia found herself standing in a dark, infinite space. The air was thick, oppressive, and the world around her was an eerie reflection of her own. The mirror was still with her, suspended in the air like a doorway to another world. "You wanted to see what could have been," the voice echoed in the distance. "Now you will see it all." The world around her flickered and shifted, revealing an endless stream of versions of her life. Some were happy, others were filled with regret, despair, and darkness. But each version was locked away in its own reality, a world that Sophia could no longer reach. She realized, too late, that the more she tried to fix her past through the reflex, the more she lost herself in the reflections, trapped in an endless cycle of choices. As the reality around her continued to warp, Sophia understood the true power of the reflex. It didn't just show you what could have been. It trapped you in the reflection, a prisoner of your own mind, unable to escape the consequences of your choices. The final lesson: days, or was it weeks, passed as Sophia wandered through the endless reflections. She was no longer sure if the version of herself standing in front of the mirror was even real. She had become a ghost in the world she had created for herself. The voice whispered one last time, "You sought to control your fate, but in the end, you are nothing more than the sum of your regrets." Sophia closed her eyes, finally understanding the true nature of the reflex. It wasn't just a tool for self-improvement, it was a trap. It showed you the infinite possibilities of your life, but in doing so, it trapped you in the cycle of constant comparison, stripping away your ability to live in the present. And as the reflection of Sophia in the mirror faded away, she knew there was no escape. The reflex had shown her everything she needed to know. Sometimes, the past is best left forgotten.